Now to that extraordinary new front that the President of the United States is now taking his fight to, taking on the Pope. And Pope Leo is responding, a statement that no Pope has ever made before, or quite frankly, ever has had to make before.
Pope Leo on Truth Social.
I don't think he's doing a very good job. He likes crime, I guess. He hit us. Think of it. He's worried about fear. What about the fear when the ministers?
Everyone online was expecting a calm, respectful, almost sacred kind of response. But what they got instead felt completely different. Because the moment Donald Trump called the Pope terrible, things didn't just escalate, they flipped. And instead of reacting emotionally, the Pope responded in a way that caught everyone off guard, turning what seemed like a routine political moment into something sharper, more personal, and strangely compelling, leaving people wondering what could possibly push a pope to respond like that.
Looking for ways to avoid for any time that's possible. To put my message on the same plane as what the president has attempted to do here, I think is not on.
So we don't like it. We don't like a pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very
Before we go any further, make sure you like and subscribe, because this story takes a turn most people didn't see coming. And honestly, it almost feels like politics ran out of enemies on Earth and decided to aim higher. Because out of nowhere, Donald Trump didn't go after a politician, a journalist, or even a judge, but instead went straight after the head of the Catholic Church.
Truth Social post, President Trump also alleged that the church only elected Leo because, quote, they thought that that would be the best way to deal with President Donald J. Trump. So our Amy Cho has more now on how members of the church are reacting to this tension back and forth.
This week, a growing feud between President Trump and Pope Leo over the war in Iran. The Holy Father pointing to the gospel as he calls for peace.
And this wasn't just any pope either. This was Pope Leo XIV, someone who had barely settled into one of the most powerful spiritual roles in the world before suddenly being treated like a guest on a debate show, judged publicly as if he were just another figure in a political argument, rather than a religious leader.
This morning that he has, quote, no fear of the Trump administration after President Trump went after him as if Pope Leo were just any other politician, saying the pontiff was, quote, weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. Here is Pope Leo's message.
The message of the church, my message, the message of the gospel, blessed are the peacemakers. I do not look at my role as being political.
What makes this situation even more bizarre is the nature of the criticism itself. Because the President of the United States looked directly at the Bishop of Rome and criticized him not for religious reasons or moral concerns, but for being weak on crime and ineffective in foreign policy, which honestly sounded like someone confused the Vatican with a political hearing and decided to continue anyway.
The war has increased tensions between President Trump and the Pope. Pope Leo has regularly criticized the U.S.-Israeli actions in Iran, while the president has called the Pope, quote, weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. In a Truth Social post, President Trump also alleged that the church only elected Leo because, quote, they thought that that would be the best way to deal with President Donald J. Trump. So our Amy Cho has more now on how members of the church are reacting to this tension back and forth.
At first, it felt like just another headline that would disappear within a day. But this time, something unexpected happened, because the Pope actually responded, not with vague diplomatic language or silence, but with a message that landed harder than any insult. And instead of stepping into the conflict, he rose above it, shifting the tone completely by focusing on a simple idea: peace, which directly clashed with the aggressive tone coming out of Washington during a time of rising tensions.
Absolutely. I mean, a remarkable statement and comments you're hearing from Pope Leo XIV this morning. And they come, Kate, in response to the president issuing sharp criticisms against the first American pope. He had called the Bishop of Rome, quote, weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy, while also claiming that Pope Leo would not have been selected if it was not for the president himself. Now, we later saw Trump double down on comments in person while speaking with reporters.
On one side, you had a president doubling down not only through speeches, but also through visuals that made him appear almost messianic. While on the other side, you had a pope who refused to throw personal attacks, yet still delivered a response that felt more powerful than any political statement. And without raising his voice, he shifted the entire conversation, making it even more significant because over 50 million Americans identify as Catholic, meaning this wasn't distant drama, but something unfolding within the same social and political space.
Message of the gospel is, and sorry to hear that, but I will continue on what I believe is the mission of the church in the world. I do not look at my role as being politician. I don't want to get into a debate with him. I don't think that the message of the gospel is meant to be abused in the way that some people are doing. And I will continue to speak out loudly against war.
That is where the tension begins to deepen. Because for years, people believed something like this would never happen. And even the idea of an American pope once felt unlikely. Yet now, the lines between political influence and spiritual authority are starting to blur. And while the Pope made it clear he does not see himself as a political player, he also showed that when politics crosses into moral territory, especially involving war and peace, he will not remain silent.
Last night, Donald Trump reached a new low when he insulted Pope Leo, the first American pope, by calling him, among other things, weak on crime and too liberal. What is going on in that man's head? He said this Trump said this in response to the Pope's comments during Easter Sunday, calling for peace. It's the same Donald Trump who has called the Bible his favorite book on the campaign trail but can't name a single verse, who sells a Trump-branded presidential election of the Bible made in China for $100.
As Pope Leo XIV continues his international visits, his message is spreading globally with a focus on unity, cooperation, and peace across cultures and religions. While at the same time, Donald Trump shows no signs of backing down, turning what started as a single remark into a much larger conversation about leadership, influence, and the role of faith in politics. And interestingly, the most powerful move in this situation was not increasing volume, but changing the direction of the conversation entirely.
This administration stand to gain from picking a fight with the very popular leader of 1.5 billion Catholics.
I mean, not much, I would say, but they pick a lot of fights, and they don't like dissent. They don't like dissent from people here at home. They don't like dissent from European allies who have a different view of foreign policy, some foreign policy issues. They seem not to like it when the Pope gives a speech. The occasion for this, I think, was the speech he gave in his annual speech, State of the World speech, you could call it, in January, which had a different view of world affairs than...
This moment challenges a common belief that aggression automatically equals strength, because sometimes the strongest response is the one that refuses to follow the expected script. And what looks like a simple exchange is actually revealing two completely different ways of thinking. One focused on dominance and pressure, and the other focused on restraint and responsibility. And what makes it more intense is that this debate is happening in real time, in front of millions.
All remember held up a Bible in front of St. John's Episcopal Church here in D.C. after ordering protesters for racial justice tear gassed. Maybe Trump has forgotten what's written in that Bible, or more likely, he never knew it in the first place. Trump allowed his criticism of Pope Leo, followed up his criticism of Pope Leo by posting an AI-generated...
When Donald Trump talks about toughness and decisive action, he connects with people who want certainty in a chaotic world. But when Pope Leo XIV emphasizes peace and moral responsibility, he speaks to those who believe stability cannot be built on constant escalation. And that is where the conflict becomes personal. Because people are no longer just asking who is right, but which version of leadership they believe in.
But yet they thought it was an insult somehow. So that's really ridiculous, honestly, and not just foolish, but insulting, I think, to, like the Pope doesn't answer to the president. But secondly, what struck me is that he was summoned to the Pentagon. As you said, Chris, we have an ambassador to the Vatican. The Vatican has a representative here. They deal all the time on diplomatic issues, as the Vatican does with almost every other nation. They go to the State Department. That's the view.
This is not just a clash between two powerful figures, because millions of American Catholics now find themselves in the middle, watching their spiritual leader and political leader move in different directions, creating a deeper tension that forces people to question identity, loyalty, and belief, while also highlighting the contrast between one side that relies on intensity and momentum and another that relies on calm, consistency, and clarity.
Pope and his relationship with the Trump administration. There are conflicting reports from Vatican sources in the Pentagon over an unusual meeting that took place earlier this year. Marianne Ahern is here to explain why the Pentagon met with the Vatican officials in the first place.
Marianne, shortly after Pope Leo's January speech to diplomats visiting the Vatican, Pentagon officials requested a meeting with those who represent the Pope in Washington, D.C. The disagreement today? What was the tone and the message?
Donald Trump continues to operate in a system where staying aggressive helps maintain attention and control the narrative. And while that strategy has worked for him in many situations, this time it is different. Because a pope is not a typical political opponent, and this is not a story that will simply fade away. Instead, it will continue to evolve, repeatedly returning to the same core question of what kind of leadership actually works when the stakes are this high.